Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Schmoedown Rundown. Introducing first, Frankie Stan Janisch, and the host of the Schmoedown Rundown, Brad Gilmore.
What's up, movie trivia Schmoedown fans? Welcome to the Schmoedown. Wait for it. Rundown, the official after show of the movie trivia Schmoedown. My name is Brad Gilmore, but you might know me by another name. You might know me as the most. Hashtag best of all time. Hashtag Brad's opinions are true. Hashtag boat life. Hashtag I'm on a boat. I am here in Houston, Texas, and there's been some tropical storms. There's been some storms, a little heavy rain, a little electricity going on through the sky. Some of my people say lightning. And because of all those reasons, I have no internet connection, and lights are so around here today. So I'm streaming from my cellular device, and I have my AirPods in, and I have one good charge on them. So let's hope the hell we can get through this show. But we're going to talk more about everything Schmoedown related. But first, I got to bring in the man, the myth, the legend. He stands in as high as the Jenga Tower. He is Frank the Tank. Stats, numbers, Janisch.
Wow, that's a lot of names. I didn't realize. Yeah. Over the course of time.
Nicknames.
Yeah, I guess over the course of time, you just tack on more and more names. I guess by default, I have a better situation going on here. I have light, electricity, and internet, so I won't gloat about it too much. But I've had quite a week, Brad. I've had quite a week. I've seen a lot of things. I've listened to a lot of things, and it's been a busy week.
Well, okay, everything's good though, right? Everything's good on the River Kwai.
Yeah. I'm really sad that you're lost at sea, but I'm sure you'll find your way back.
It was pretty. You know what? I never knew that this boat thing would have so many puns off of it, right? Because like when I was sick the other week, I was seasick. And then now I'm lost at sea. It's just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. Also, shout out to the super producer, Chris Clark. Chris, what's up, man?
It is super hot here in Pennsylvania. I'm awesome, Brad, and I'm not ADRing myself this time, so let's rock this sucker.
It's so crazy.
Called him out.
So, okay, he just called himself out. We did the episode last week. I got to tell everyone this. We did the episode last week, and it was up real quick, So I was like, you know what? Let me go back and listen to it. And I distinctly remember asking Chris Clark about Kima Boardwalk. And he gave me this certain answer, which was just an odd, very Chris Clark-y answer, And it was something about, it essentially boiled down to it kind of sucked. The boardwalk kind of sucked and it was small. Was essentially what he said.
Yeah.
So, and I said, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad I asked. So I went back to listen to the episode, and then he had this whole monologue at the top of the show, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember this. And then it comes back into me saying, I'm glad I asked. And he actually gave like this great answer about the great people of Houston and the beautiful Kima Boardwalk. And then I come in like an a-hole and I go, well, I'm glad I asked. And I was like, Chris. So I text him, or I DM'd him in our group chat, and I said, Chris, did you ADR your answer? And he was like, yeah, sometimes I do that if I don't like my answer. And I'm like, well, thanks for making me look like a total jerk. I look like Paul Oyama. You know what I mean? It was just...
The best part about the ADR was, I think it was like in his second answer, Chris, you gave this chuckle in there. You threw a chuckle in there? Like it was like as if it was so impromptu, like we had a time. Like killing me. It was great.
Chris
so anyways,
Clark,
go back and listen to the first part of last week's episode with Chris, and you'll totally get what we're talking about.
And now that you know that it was 80-yard in,
right.
And he didn't even tell us that he was going to do that. There was no warning. And then now we're going to go back and listen to this episode. He's going to take out where he said he 80-yard himself.
Exactly.
And there would be like, what are you talking about?
But
anyway, we have a lot to talk about on the show this week. Thank you to everybody who checked out the show last week. We did great numbers on YouTube. Our special interview with Christian Harloff and the new Movie Trivia Schmoedown team champion Jeff Snyder, one half of The Odd Couple. Really great stuff last week. And we have more stuff to do. But speaking of Christian Harloff, there was something that was brought up in the Facebook group a couple weeks ago, Frank, and I feel like I'd be remiss if we didn't bring it up on this show. because it directly affected us. So I just want to let everybody know out there, if you weren't already aware, the chairman of the board made a executive decision that Frank and I, and I'll speak for Chris as well, and he'll speak for himself in ADR later. We all agree on it. The rundown this year at the Movie Trivia Schmoedown Awards, which, by the way, we're the 2-time show of the year. We are not eligible for nomination this year. We're Christian said that we're an official part of the Movie Trivia Schmoedown. We're on the Schmoedown channel. We have a bit of an unfair advantage amongst the competition just because of the platform we're able to reach, because we're reaching literally the same crowd that the Schmoedown is reaching on the same channel. So for those reasons and for others, we are not going to be eligible for the award this year. I think this is a great move. I'm excited to see who's going to come up the ranks, because now you know what this means, Frank? You know what this means? It's kind of like when the Bulls were on top, right? They were on top of the world. The other teams, they weren't really even trying to compete with the Bulls. They're just like, well, they're going to win. They have Michael, they have Scotty, they have Steve. They're going to – well, I'm the boat, so we'll figure that out later. I'll let the fans figure that out.
I don't know.
Yeah. Tony Kukoc. But whenever Jordan left, whenever the boat left and went to play baseball, the other teams all of a sudden were like, you know what? This is a different game now. And guess who came up and won? The Houston Rockets back to back.
Yeah.
So
you're welcome.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for all of his gambling habits. But I say that to say, maybe, and I'm hoping so, all the other people who do the Schmoedown after shows and the reactors are now looking at each other and saying, okay, the championship is available now. All right. It's clear. So now I want to start seeing these guys cutthroat. I want to see people taking shots at each other. I want to see them up their content game. Look, guys, I made this official, and we shook on it via Facebook likes. Frank and I will be presenting the award at the Movie Trivia Schmoedown Awards. So you better bring your A game, because the boat and the tank are going to be in the building. Chris Clark's going to be there as well. And we're going to make sure that y'all rock this sucker to the end of time, whatever after show you have. So, Frank Janisch, what do you have to say about us being out of contention this year?
I had thought about this for actually quite a while. I meant to bring it up to Christian and you guys. But then I found out via Facebook post that, what I was thinking, Christian was thinking as well. And that's how we found out. But I tell you who wasn't pleased with this. So my mother was in Texas visiting some family, and she was listening to the show. She was showing them, some other family what we do here, and my mom and the fam out in Texas, in Austin actually, we're not a fan. Yeah, we're not a fan of Christian taking us out of the running, and they were not a fan that this is the way we found out. According to my mother, they were very upset. This is how it all went down. And they were like, if they're the best show, then they should win. And I tried to explain to my mother, to relay to them, hey, it's fine. Did you read what I posted in their mind? And she's like, yeah. And so, but, they're not happy. But I think this is a completely legitimate or the right thing to do. That's the word. Because like you said, we just by default, we were gifted this platform on kind of an accident, but I think we've earned it, and continue to earn it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to win this year.
Who steps up?
Yeah.
Who steps up? Either step up or step off. All right. That's what the vote says. And by the way, Mama Janisch, shout out to you. You're what we call a ride or die. I can appreciate that in any person, especially a mother of Frank. So shout out to Mom Janisch and all the Texas fam. I forgot that you have roots down here in the Lone Star State. So shout out to the Texas fam. Also want to shout out to Confidential Cinema. They did a Q&A with Tom Dagnino that we always know is going to be entertaining. Make sure you go check that out. And Call to Action did an interview with Chance Ellison, who's got a big match coming up here soon. A match I've been really looking forward to a lot with Paul Oyama. They did a great interview with him as well.
The Q&A with Dagnino, that was for Confidential Cinema with like Henry Sanchez and the boys over there. And I only had a chance to watch like a few minutes of it, but they have him on video. So seriously, go watch that video because It literally looks like Tom Dagnino's in WITSEC, like the Witness Protection Program. He has this black silhouette over him, and he's given this Q&A, and Dagnino's being Dagnino. So with that description alone, go find that video, Confidential Cinema, and also go find out Call to Action. Actually, I'm going to tell you what, Call to Action, I've been listening to them frequently now, and they might be one of my favorites. They've been doing some really good work there. I mean, there's obviously Take 3 out there, Dedicated Art, those folks, those guys over there. So, but Call to Action, man, they got a style that I'm digging here. So check them out.
Also, Mark with a movie blog. He's been doing some great reviews. He did a talk in Schmoedown where he reviewed the Houston Live event, and he tried to call out Christian Harloff for saying that Christian didn't say pins down at Andrew Guy. And here's my thing, man. Brother, I know you're listening, brother. Go listen back to the audio that you put in there. Christian clearly says at the end, pins down. I mean, he says it clear as day. I see it. I'm not trying to start anything. I'm not trying to start any beef. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. But moving on, we have a great guest on the show today. We have the boss, Ben Bateman, the man who was victorious in the aforementioned Houston Live event, and now a member of the 5 Horsemen. What does he have to say about all the things going on in the league and about his pending singles career? He's either going to be facing Janine the Machine or Mike Kalinowski, and then winner of that match would go on to face Jeff Snyder from how I see things laying out here. So a lot to talk to Ben Bateman about. We're going to have a great interview with him. But first, Frank, I feel like we got to talk about the matches that were this week, because I think that when you looked at the schedule on the Movie Trivia Schmoedown and you saw this week of matches, you're probably like, oh, okay, I mean, this is a cool week. I don't really know some of these names so well. The Family versus Inky and the Brain was more competitive than I thought it should have been and was going to be, especially when you have the Godfather, Drew McQueenie, a former team champion, and then you have Inky and the Brain, where, they haven't gotten off to a great start as of yet. Going into this match, who did you really see coming out of it? I mean, you saw the Family, right? I mean, there wasn't really another option.
Yeah, I mean, you have to when you look at a player like Drew McQueenie, whatever team he's on, I mean, you automatically are going to go, they have the shot. They have more than likely the upper hand. They're probably the favorite. Like you mentioned, he's a former team champion, and he's playing with Andrew Guy, who wants some personal redemption after Houston. He wants to play well, at least in the first round, which he did do here. I mean, him both and McQueenie both had 6 points in the first round. So it was a good bounce back performance for Andrew Guy, given what he went through in Houston. But you're right. I was leaning towards the Family, but when you look at Inky and the Brain, Devin, he has like his pockets of knowledge that he's really good at. And Silvestrini, I think we're still getting to know, but she seems to have some pockets here, but also a pretty good base set of knowledge too. But we're not quite sure just how deep the well goes, if only because we've only seen them in a couple matches. We haven't seen a whole lot. So we had more history to go on for the Family than we did for Inky and the Brain. And so combine that with Drew McQueenie's pedigree. I mean, sure, I think most people are leaning to Family, but like as you said, this was way more competitive than I think people were expecting.
Yeah, it was a sneaky competitive match. But first, we saw Robert Meyer Burnett and Drew McQueenie, having a conversation, and they're worried about Andrew Guy after what we saw in H-Town, where he got the chair to the back from Ben Bateman. And Andrew Guy, though, interrupts him, walks in, has a little bit of a limp to him, and says, let's do this, essentially. So then, boom, we go right into the match. Before the first round kicked off, Andrew Guy also had some words for Booker T. He said, I thought he recognized greatness or something like that. Yeah. And you know what, Andrew? I know you're my guy. You're my guy. Andrew Guy's my guy. But don't let that bulldog mouth overload that puppy dog ass, what I mean, when it comes to Booker T. Because the Booker man will eat you up, brother. He'll eat you up like some short ribs. Don't try them. It's going to be on like a steaming pot of neck bones. It's been on the stove for about 3 days. You know what I'm saying? And meat just falling off the bone, Andrew, guys. So don't do anything with Booker T. Not advisable. But talk about, Frank, really this started to get competitive in round 2. So let's go right to that. Let's go to how did round 2 start off score-wise? And then let's break down what happened a little bit.
Yeah, so coming out of round 1, 12-1, just a 1-point advantage for his family, which, was kind of surprising, to be honest. But, round 2 is where things got really, really interesting because when Inking the Brain finally lands on Kevin Smith, you go, okay, let's see what happens here. And then all of a sudden, Rachel Silvestrini just blows the doors off this category with a teeny tiny bit of help from Devin. Let's not give him no credit here, but I think he probably helped on 1, maybe 2 questions. But nonetheless, this was kind of a coming out party to the fans, at least, and to the Schmoedown for Rachel Silvestrini here. They went 6 of 6. Went to multiple choice just once. And if that's your follow-up to a pretty good first round, 11-point first round, to follow it up with 11 points of your own, I mean, you just sent a very strong message to Andrew Guy and Drew McWeeny, the Drews. I'm just calling them the Drews from now on. This was such a great setup for the rest of the match because now you're like, wait a minute, the family here is supposed to win this one, but now I think these two, could they have a legitimate shot at toppling the great Drew McWeeny and the hobbled Andrew Guy? This immediately, as like the first 3 questions here, boom, 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 the 4, even the multiple choice, you're just like, oh man, something is going to happen here, and now I'm way invested more than I thought it was going to be, and it's just a hell of a performance from Silvestrini here, going against a loudmouth and Andrew Guy who can get in your head, and they kind of talk about that at the end, and obviously such respect for Drew McWeeny, so this was really took me by surprise. I don't know about you.
Oh, it took me the round 2. Like I said, that's why I wanted to talk about it. It took me by way, way off. I did not expect an 11-point swing for Rachel Silvestrini and her teammate and Devon because, especially a guy like Drew McWeeny and Andrew Guy. I know we've harped on it a lot, but Andrew, the cerebral player, and then Drew McWeeny, the hoss. I mean, when you talk about just answering questions, this guy has a bank of information. And to not be swayed by that at all, to get a category like Kevin Smith, which really is a toss-up category, because Kevin Smith movies, I think probably 90% of the people out there, moviegoers out there, they might have heard of 1 or 2. They might be aware of Kevin Smith, but not to a large degree, not to a Steven Spielberg or a Quentin Tarantino or a Martin Scorsese level, right? Because he's just I'm talking about wide range, national reach, probably not the most recognizable name. You say Jay and Silent Bob might ring a doorbell, but not just Kevin Smith. So for her to have a good of a round as she did, her and Devin Stewart to have a good a round as they did, I didn't know how the family was going to react to that because we've only seen the family really once prior. It was against Ben and Dagnino, and that match it's Dagnino, and you just don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's a good baseline for exactly what the family can do trying to come back from a big point differential, and then talk about what they did, Frank, when it's their turn to round 2.
Yeah, so they send the golden arm up there, Drew McWeeny, to spin the old wheel. And he lands on comedy. And I was thinking, well, 80s is up there, and maybe he could go for spinners, and so there's 2 slices up there trying to get maybe a category they want. But he says, let's roll with it. And I was glad when he did, because when you look at his career running with Above the Line, I mean, they had probably the most favorable spin to unfavorable spin ratio any team has ever had, and that's that's credit to their run. I mean, that they had in the title that they won. So for him to go, I'm not going to spin in. Let's just do comedy. It's a broad category. It's not a category that he's shown the league, I guess, as far as I can tell, that he's aced like 80s and 70s, categories he can just dominate. We've seen him dominate time and time again. So to go a broad category with comedy, I thought was going to be very interesting. And and they basically just go perfect. They do go perfect.
They
6
do.
for 6 for the 12 points. I mean, it was a tour de force from Drew McWeeny. It was classic old school McWeeny. I'm just going to plow through these questions. I mean, he was having a good time up there, chuckling at giving answers. Some of these movies I had never even heard of, and he's just like this person. I was like, what is going on here? And, you know, you could have reasonably assumed that, you know, the family, to keep their lead, they were going to have to go either match what Inky and the Brain did or go perfect. And not everyone can go perfect all the time in a second round for the max 12 points. They might go 6 for 6, but maybe it's for 10 or 9 points. But they ended up putting 12 up of their own to now tack on one more point to that lead. So they're up 24-22. And this is the end of just 2 rounds. I mean, a total of, I think, you know, only 4, 5, 6, whatever, 8 total questions between everyone has been missed. And that was only in the first round. So, like, this was setting up to be something special. And, I mean, 24-22 after the first 2 rounds, that's an incredible number.
Yeah, but the only bad thing is that's where the number stayed.
Yeah.
That's the only bad thing. When it was time for Inky and the Brain to go up there for their third round, I think that the reason this third round fell apart, I believe, what was the first category for question 1 for the 2-pointer?
Kate Blanchett, yeah.
Kate Blanchett, and then the Tarantino was the next one. So they this was one of those things of their new team.
Mm-hmm.
And when in that third round, the first one, I think even Jeff talked about it maybe last week on the show, of that first question is really just a toss-up because you don't know what the second category is going to be, and the person who's going to get the second category is already locked in. You know what I mean? And that's really where the luck of the game comes into play. And for Inky and the Brain, Kate Blanchett, you know, Devin Stewart, not the best at Kate Blanchett. I don't know why he would have gone with that. Really, you would think Silvestrini may have been better in that category. I don't know why.
You know, look at what the play-by-play from Andrew Guy during that deliberation for them. I mean, it was spot on. It was whether or not, you know, Inky and the Brain want to admit that's the exact thinking. You're never going to throw someone under the bus on your team like that. But I mean, it's a classic case of I feel like I've been playing better, so therefore I should probably take the 3 just in case. And that's a classic rookie mistake in terms of team competition, because I think teams and players have figured out you can't play for the question you're not answering yet. You have to play for the question that's right in front of you. Exactly. And not to mention, this was to tie the match. This wasn't like to take the lead. This was to tie it. So therefore, it was going to have to go back to the family if you answered it correctly. So there's a couple things there that I think they'll definitely look at and learn from. But had, you know, Silvestrini answered this Kate Blanchett, which it looked like she would have gotten right, then it goes back to the family. And then what if they miss all their 3? Then they win the match, you know? So a lot of things could have happened, but, you know, I think this was a classic rookie mistake, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And because, you know, Devin Stewart pretty much said that he would have taken that Quentin Tarantino answer about Sam Jackson in Pulp Fiction. What was his character's name? So, you know, I agree with you. It's a rookie mistake. Family didn't even have to go in round 2 at all. And now the family are going to challenge the Evil Geniuses, or they have challenged the Evil Geniuses to a match. Now, let me frame this for you for a second, Frank. If the family that are now 2-0, if they go against the Evil Geniuses, knock them off, they're 3-0. So when are we in title contention here? I mean, when are we going to start talking titles for the family? Because you have the collision. We know that's set up. Yeah. That's locked in. And this is my honest opinion. If the family can find themselves in title contention, because if they win 3 in a row, I would think their next match has to be a number 1 contenders match. Don't you think?
It would have to be, because
it would have to be.
Unless, I mean, I don't. If this is in fact the Evil Geniuses' next match, then there's no way it can be a number 1 contenders match. So, yeah, the family's going to have to go 4-0 to probably get a title shot. You're right about that.
Right. Now think about this. If I'm the family and I'm thinking about, wow, you know, we're 2-0. And to be honest with you, I kind of like their odds against the Evil Geniuses. I know that's weird because Lon's a strong player. Yeah. JT's a very strong player, especially in teams. But if anybody knows how to beat JT in teams, it's Drew McQueenie. And if anybody can talk louder than JTE, it's Andrew Guy. So
Right.
I like their odds in that match. I would pick the family over Evil Geniuses. So they go on, boom, they win. If I'm the family and I'm thinking, okay, my next match might be a number one contenders match. I'm going to be in title contention. Who would I rather face? Would I rather face the Shire Wolves or would I rather face the Odd Couple? I'm 1,000% saying the Odd Couple. And that's no slight to Jeff Snyder and to Mark Andreyko. But just looking at history, once again, Drew McQueenie has defeated Jeff Snyder for a team championship. Mark Andreyko, sometimes he's on fire, sometimes he's a little off. I think that the family and the Odd Couple kind of balance each other out. And then what would happen storyline-wise if you saw the family and the Odd Couple, because you have the Roxy Stryer element. Because we saw Roxy Stryer give Andrew Guy a kiss on the cheek after this match, and Andrew kind of looked off at her and then went on with his business. I just think there's so many interesting factors at play. Now, I am 1,000% fantasy booking, and I'm aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm aware of how far in the future I am. But I'm just saying it's not inconceivable that this great thing could go down. And man, would it be awesome if it's in Arizona or if it's in Orlando or if it's, I don't know, if it's at a live event. God, there's just so many possibilities, Frank.
Because we know that tournament matches are going to be at New York. So, the Odd Couple, let's say if they don't hold on to the belts, Odd Couple could end up facing family in a first round match in New York in a live setting. That'd be crazy. You could see some ridiculous stuff go down there. To see, the path for the family certainly is looking a lot clearer now. Two more wins, and they have to be in a title match. I just, unless for some reason something else comes up, I don't know. Because, the other thing that could come up is Dan Murrell and his title shot. He could. What if the family is lined up for a shot at the title, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, and whatever circumstances are at that time, Dan Murrell goes, no, not right. That's not your time. I'm going to cash this in, and I'm going to go. The founding fathers are going to go, and now, it's Dan Murrell kind of sticking it a little bit to Andrew Guys, saying, "I have this shot. I know you have yours, but I'm going to take your title shot right now away because I'm going to take mine." It could be an interesting story point. I don't know exactly how that would work out, but I like to see some sort of version.
But the thing is, I think that the founding fathers would right now. They're on track to getting a number one contender shot without having to cash that in.
True.
So we really. Again, I don't. I'd have to look at the rankings, and I'm sure somebody more knowledgeable than I, Christian, who has them on the top of his head at all times, could be able to tell us right this second. But you could maybe conceivably see a number one contenders match between the family and the founding fathers. So I'm just saying, I just like what's going on right now.
There's so much going on,
and I really like this family team. It's such a funky team. It's an odd team. Really, when you look at stylistically, there are differences in play and their strengths and weaknesses. But I really think that, I don't know, they might have stumbled onto something.
There's an interesting common thread between the family, the Odd Couple, and Evil Geniuses, if you ask me, that there's at least one player that's, I think, almost
been a champion.
Been a champion. Yeah, you're right about that part. But also, there's, I would say, McWeenie, Snyder, and I guess more to an extent, Lon Harris, more of a consistent player. JTE, don't get me wrong. He's a great player in teams, but there's a reason why he's been a 500 player in singles. So he can get hot streaky good. Same thing with Andreyko. Same thing for Andreyko, and I can say the same thing for Andrew Guy. So there is so much volatility within these teams, and they might end up fighting one another. It's going to make for insanity when these teams go up against each other, if in fact this does happen. It's an exciting time in the teams leagues, that's for damn sure.
Absolutely. Anything's up for grabs after Collision. We'll have to see what happens. Now let's go into our second match before we bring Ben Bateman on. Let's talk about match number 2. Then we're going to have our special guest, Ben the Boss Bateman, joining us for over a half an hour he's scheduled for. But we saw a little pre-match scene between Emma Fife and Christian Harloff. Christian Harloff, of course, the commissioner of the league, Emma Fyfe, he's the chairman of the league. Emma Fife's the commissioner of the Inner Geekdom and the Teams League. And Emma Fyfe and Christian talk about this fatal 4-way Inner Geekdom match between Chance Ellison, Keaton Markey, Chandru, and Brandon Hanna. And then they discussed this Manager Bowl at Collision. Now, the first Manager Bowl at the Spectacular, 2, I believe it was.
Right.
Was without a doubt one of the most entertaining matches on that Spectacular card. I mean, no one expected that coming, to be that much fun, the Manager Bowl. Low expectations, but delivered. The Commissioner Bowl, which was a whole hell of a lot of fun that I got to be on the call for at the Spectacular. Another just great match. Some people said, I think, aside from the Who's the Boss Shire Wolves match, maybe the most entertaining match of the Spectacular.
100%.
100%. So now we're having the Manager Bowl, and Christian's really turning up this Vince McMahon-ness of him. Vince, especially in the brand's extension era, which I think was 2002 around in WWE, whenever the general managers took over for the respective brands, which is similar to these commissioners, right? Okay. You had Stephanie McMahon, or you had Paul Heyman on SmackDown. You had this guy named Eric Bischoff on Raw, and they were kind of running the two brands. And then Vince was still the chairman of the board. And once Eric Bischoff thought he had something all put together, Vince would come down and be like, you know what, Eric, I'm changing it all. And he'd change up everything, or he'd screw with them, or he'd say, you're fighting Steve Austin. He just messed up the plan. And I feel like Christian Harloff came in here and said, hey, Emma, you kind of get a little drunk with power. I'm going to be the check on you real quick. And I'm going to be a little bit drunk with power, I guess, myself. And I'm going to say, there's going to be a Manager Bowl, but instead of the managers competing themselves, they're going to have 5 competitors representing them. And whoever wins the Manager Bowl is going to be the boss of Emma and Sam for a month. So essentially a step below Christian and a step above Emma and Sam for a whole month. Now, here are the people that we know are going to be in this Manager Bowl, right? Or that we're assuming are going to be in the Manager. Are these confirmed names, Frank Janisch?
All but Corruption, yeah.
Okay. So Jay Washington, Tom Dagnino, Robert Meyer Burnett. We're assuming maybe Grace and Ken representing Corruption, and Kaiser.
Well, these are the managers that would be in line for the award to be the boss, not necessarily the players representing them. We don't know that.
Yeah. We don't know the players at all. But if these are some of our managers who could be in line, right? Let's think about who they're selecting. If I'm Jay Washington, you know who I'm selecting?
Ethan Irwin.
If I'm Tom Dagnino.
This is an interesting one. I'm kind of inclined to say Ben.
I'm inclined to say Ben Bateman, too. Yeah. I'm inclined to say Ben Bateman, but you could say Mark Riley. You could say, technically now, John Roca. Yeah. You could say Dan Murrell.
Would you put the champ in sort of an exhibition style match like that?
No. Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. But it would be interesting. But I think he goes with Ben Bateman. Okay, let's go to Robert Meyer Burnett. I think he goes Andrew Guy.
He could, if
Dagnino does Bateman.
Yeah, then you
Robert
got
Meyer Burnett does Andrew Guy.
You got to put him in there.
Corruption. Who do you put from Corruption?
So, this is interesting because it depends. I was thinking about this because, well, I want to jump to Kaiser first because this pertains to who Corruption would put in.
Zipper, Oyama?
It's got to be Oyama. Smets, I've heard, he said elsewhere that he's not that great at general trivia, so it wouldn't be him. And Zipper, like he's more of he's a kind of a platoon player, utility player. He's not on the level of an Ethan Irwin or a Ben Bateman.
He's a project right now,
right? So that leaves Oyama, and right now, as it stands at Collision, he has an opportunity if he beats Chance to be in that number 1 contenders match at Collision. So Kaiser would have to pick Oyama because he's like their best singles player right now. So that means Corruption could then put Chance up there, but you only put Chance up there if Chance doesn't beat Paul in their match, I think. Otherwise, you could put up Kalinowski. because you wouldn't want to put Chance up against Paul again if Chance beat Paul. I wouldn't want to see that
right. I see what you're saying.
tandem up there personally.
It is interesting.
So there's a couple different, there's a lot of different interesting combinations. And just to kind of jump ahead a teeny bit, it kind of plays into one of my scenarios that I wrote in that Faction Wars article. We'll get to that later. But so seeing the potential lineup here, all 5 people at a desk. Oh, dude, come on.
It's going to be hilarity. We know this. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we'll see exactly how it shapes out when we get closer to Collision. Now, let's talk about the match, though, that we saw. David Del Rio versus Liz Shannon Miller. The winner of this match was going to go on to play JTE. And then the winner of JTE and whoever won this match is going to go on to play the winner of Oyama and Ellison at Collision for the number 1 contendership. And then that person will face the champ, Dan Burrow. Okay. David Del Rio, don't know a lot, really. Liz Shannon Miller, we've seen some glimpses before. I didn't really know who was going to win this match, and I liked the 2, rookies of the league. I was going to say young, but I mean, upstart
young
in
to
the league.
Yeah.
Young to the league. That's what I was trying to say. Young to the league. I like that they're getting the opportunity to go for singles gold, which is cool. Not a lot of people get that. It's a very Rocky Balboa-esque, or should I say Andy Ruiz Jr.-esque move, to do, giving somebody a shot, out of nowhere. And who knows, like we saw in the boxing world, you never know what's going to happen there. So I didn't know what to expect. Now, I will say this. It wasn't the most highly scored match in the history of the movie Trivia Schmoedown.
Nope.
13-11 is how the match ended, and we're going to get into it. But there were some glimpses of greatness from both players, but also I thought there was some really glaring, obvious weaknesses in terms of gaps in their movie knowledge for certain things, right? And I think that David Del Rio, for some reason, new releases don't stick with him.
Yeah.
He got the new release category in round 2, didn't do so hot in it, and then he had actually ended up getting a new release category in round 3. Was one of his, I don't know if it was his 3-pointer, maybe.
It was his 5.
It was his 5-pointer.
Yeah.
So it was a tough one. But still, new releases didn't stick with him well. And Liz Shannon Miller hasn't seen a lot of films from the 90s.
Or at least can't remember him within 15 seconds.
Yeah. Or can't remember from Osmosis Jones, I think may have been from the early 2000s.
Sure.
All I know is it had Chris Rock, Bill Murray, and I think Kid Rock was like a musical performer in the body somewhere. I'm pretty sure. You can look that up. I might be wrong. But these were actually all like my generation of movies, like My Favorite Martian and stuff like that. These are movies that I kind of grew up on. So maybe I have an unfair advantage. But what stuck out to you, Frank Janisch, between David Del Rio and Liz Shannon Miller?
They were in. This was really like a war of attrition. I thought some of these questions were really tough. I think they had some.
They were,
especially the second round. I mean, first round was pretty average, on par with the rest of the league, 6-5, ending with Liz Shannon Miller up by 1. So it wasn't an atrocious first round. I think it shows that they legitimately belong here because look at coming off their first matches. I mean, they had impressive debuts. Liz answered 86% of her questions. David Del Rio answered 81%. I mean, that's phenomenal. Now, they had a big drop-off here, and that's due to the difficulty of the questions. And I mean, both of them struggled here. Like I said, there were some tough questions here. I thought that second round was just they combined to answer 3 questions of their own that were given to them, and obviously there was 3 steals. Del Rio did a little bit better with the family category. I think maybe that's why he took it. He figured he could steal some points if he ever got the opportunity. He went 2 of 3 on steal opportunities, but this was a real struggle. And look, in the Midwest, in the NFC North, we like our defense. This was it felt like a defensive battle. Not a lot of offense, not a lot of flash. It was just, all right, I'm going to slug you here, and then I'm going to sit back, and then hopefully I get another opportunity. I'm not going to be dancing around a whole lot, and if I see an opening, I'll take it. And it's kind of what the second round felt like, but it was honestly kind of pretty compelling to me. And it ended, still 9-8 with Del Rio with the 1-point lead.
if you go watch this UFC fight, it's Francis Ngannou versus the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, right? And these are two guys known for knocking people out, just cold cocking people out cold. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, I'm ready for this match. Somebody's getting knocked out. And you're talking about Liz Shannon Miller, David Del Rio, 80% correct. Oh man, it's going to be a high scoring affair, right? Well, in Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis, it has a record for the least thrown punches in heavyweight MMA history. Both guys were a little scared of one another. They knew that they could get knocked out at any time. I wouldn't say it was a defensive affair either. They just really weren't throwing a lot of shots at each other. Okay. And then if you were adapted to a basketball game, I kind of think it's one of these games that end 88 to 84. Sure. It's not a high scoring game.
A 90s basketball game, basically.
Right. Nobody's making shots. They're trying their best. No one's making shots. It's just one of those nights to where it's not in the cards for you. I kind of felt, and I don't want to come off negative at all, and I hope that I'm not, but I kind of felt like that was what we saw in this match between David Del Rio and Liz Shannon Miller. Just there weren't whole lot of shots falling. They were shooting. Yeah, they were shooting. Just not a whole lot of shots were falling for them. And like you said, it could have been the difficulty of the questions comparatively to their first match. It could have been these were just, like I said, gaps in their knowledge base between family films and new releases, because it was that second round where things really got a little hairy for both of them, and it kind of played out there. Liz Shannon Miller wins, but it's not a resounding victory by any means. And if I'm Liz Shannon Miller, I kind of wanted a resounding victory going into a match against a guy like a JTE. You know what I mean? You want a little bit more confidence in yourself going into that next match. I think that obviously they both know that they can improve on this because they've done better before. But Liz Shannon Miller, now you're staring down the barrel at JTE. You're going to have to really fill in the gaps there in family category. You're going to have to do a little bit of studying. You can't just wake up out of bed and go against a guy like JTE and expect to get a victory.
No, I think you're right about that. But the one thing I will say about Liz, though, is look, she's backed by Ethan Irwin. That's high praise. High praise. And she walks into every match now basically with that on her shoulders. Everyone knows this now. So it's not like and just quick note on Liz in this match, she just seems like the nicest, happiest person ever.
She seems like a sweetheart.
I mean, she looked like she was cordial to a point of it made Roxy want to puke. How's it go, Brad?
He's gonna puke. He's gonna puke.
I watched that clip. I watched the whole documentary. I told you that, and it was great. Yeah. But that scene was great. But
shout out to Barry Blaustein. He's the director.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, Liz just looks like the nicest person. I can't wait to meet her in person if I get that chance. But talking about resounding wins, sometimes these you win these bare knuckle fights like this, and that can look, I got through this, and now I can hopefully weather my way through another tough match if need be. But I think her knowledge runs deep. I think that's an evidence through her debut match. Same thing with David Del Rio. I think the fact that they both had strong debuts, the fact that they both had subpar follow-up matches, given that they had the same questions in round one and the difficulty level seemed pretty on par in round two, I kind of go, maybe it was more of the questions this time around, and hopefully they can bounce back whenever their next match is. Well, we know for Liz, it will be against JTE or JTE, right? So, I'm excited to see Liz what she can do against someone like JTE, who, look, that's someone Liz has never encountered before in the Schmoedown, given her career is only 2 matches old. David Del Rio seems like a real nice guy. JTE, he's respectful to a degree, but he's also gonna yap his gums. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man, wholeheartedly. So we'll see how this all plans out for Liz Shannon Miller. Maybe she studies up. Maybe she gets some pro tips from Ethan Irwin, changes some strategy up a little bit. Maybe the wheel falls her way a little bit better against JTE because
she got opponents,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not the greatest thing to get in a match. I think Andrew Guy can tell you that. But I think that her going against JTE is really going to be JTE is he's a standard bearer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He's the standard bearer, in my opinion, in the movie Trivia Schmoedown. I know he's a 500 player, but he's such a classic in the Schmoedown that if you can go out and you can beat JTE, okay, let me pay more attention to what's going on here. You know what I mean? He's an attention getter if you can go out and get a win against him. So we'll see how she goes against Liz Shannon Miller goes against JTE, and then see if maybe she can go make it all the way, run the gauntlet, and maybe we're going to see Liz Shannon Miller versus Dan Murrell. You don't know what could happen in this league at all, but you're going to have to get past JTE, and that's a big task, man.
And if Liz does in fact beat JTE, she will go 3-0, and she's only one of like a dozen people to ever have a 3-game winning streak. So, Merle, Rachel Cushing, Ethan Irwin, Mike Kalinowski did it, Clark Wolf. So she'd be in some pretty high company that has ever had a 3-game winning streak.
Absolutely, man. Well, then let's talk about some odd company. Tom Dagnino and Robert Meyer Burnett had a little bit of an altercation after this match. They were essentially talking about Houston and then kind of hyping up their beef between one another. And I actually liked how Robert Meyer Burnett, when Dagnino tries to short him a little bit, Robert Meyer Burnett's like, "Hey man, I was a champion in this league."
Yeah.
And then Dagnino's like, "Yeah, that's when like 2 people were in it." And
he brings up Navarro.
And then when he brings up Navarro, and Robert Meyer Burnett goes, "Navarro, why would you?" And yells. I think it was so funny. I audibly laughed when I was watching it. Love Robert Meyer Burnett in this new character that he's got, turning up the volume, just letting it all hang out there. And Tom Dagnino, once again, man, as far as he's cut scenes.
Buongiorno, moron. That was great.
As far as the cut scenes go, he might be the cutscene king. Tom Dagnino might be the cutscene king. Yeah, for sure. He's just so funny.
It's great, and it's funny the way the scene was wrapping up was, that Tom was like, how we got to settle this, and Robert Meyer Burnett's like a bell to the death. He's like, no, we're gonna just play the Schmoedown, which of course he's referencing, I believe now, the Manager Bowl at Collision. So it's gonna be interesting, man. And I love these scenes with Robert Meyer Burnett and Tom Dagnino, especially Dagnino. You're right. I think he is kind of like the GOAT of these scenes here. It's. I always remember the one he did he was on the phone. And he ends it by, "I love you too, Grandma." Like he's just like, it's great.
So good.
Someone make a compilation of Tom Dagnino cutscenes. Can someone do that? I don't know if we have that out there, but I would love to see it.
I would love to see it too. But right now we're about to check in with the birthday boy. We're about to check in with Ben the Boss Bateman. He's joining us on the line right now. Let's go to that interview with Ben the Boss Bateman here on the Schmoedown Rundown, brother. And joining us right now here on the Rundown, the man who stood tall in the Lone Star State and now has the rest of the season ahead of him. He is the boss, 1/5 of the 5 horsemen, Ben Bateman. Ben, how are you?
What's up, guys? I'm really happy to be back on the Rundown. It's been a minute. It's been a little bit since I've been here.
Some things have happened. There's been a couple of things that have occurred.
Sure.
We're gonna get all into that, but first we're actually doing this on your birthday. So happy birthday!
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I know the Action Army is going crazy. I'm sure you have a bunch of gifts being sent to your doorstep as we speak. But let's talk about the first thing first. The last time that we saw you in the Schmoedown. Let's talk about Houston, man. Give me your experience of coming down to H-Town and stepping inside the Booker T World Gym Arena.
It was like nothing else. It was like no other live event that I've ever experienced. I mean, it was mind blowing, honestly. Like, just the atmosphere being inside a wrestling arena was so different, and playing against Andrew Guy, all the history there and all the expectation there was amazing. Obviously, the big finish was so crazy and such a different move than anything we had ever gotten to do before in the Schmoedown. And then, I mean, the funny thing is, if most players come out and the stakes are in their favor, like they were in mine in terms of the spins that I got, and I think most players feel like they're the best at trivia ever if that happens to them. I missed one question. I got every one of his questions and mine. Missed one round, one question. That's not always going to happen, but it was a nice affirmation of where I'm at as a trivia player to have a match like that in front of a live crowd and be able to pull it off. Kind of a layup in terms of the actual trivia, because like spinners and opponents, what are you going to do? But I don't know, man. There was a lot of expectation on the match too, right? Like, I really felt the weight of the world sort of going into it. I had kind of talked myself out of the level of confidence that I normally play with because of that stupid narrative that gets created by all the online discourse of, choking in live events, which is not true, by the way. You're all liars.
well, this time you definitely came up big. Would you agree, though? We said on the show that the Houston live event, especially y'all's match, mostly, the match was the first match I can remember in the Schmoedown to where the story was more important than the play. Would you agree with that?
100%. It was a story match. Yeah, it didn't. If you look at the actual trivia games that got played in those two matches, it was pretty low level. Like so much so that, there's a lot of morons online talking about it being rigged.
Right.
But we didn't need it, is the crazy thing. I mean, it to a first-time watcher, it looks, to a first-time watcher, it just looks like, oh, there's one guy who's really good at trivia, and another guy's really bad at trivia. And wow, he hit him with a chair, and the story, and who are these managers and this music, and it just didn't matter. I think it was the most exciting live event we've ever done, and the trivia was definitely secondary.
Absolutely. I know Frank was sitting there, and we were talking during the whole time in Houston, obviously, and I'll be honest with you, Ben, there was a lot of back and forth between Frank and I about, I don't know, is Andrew going to do this? Is Ben going to pull it off? I don't know. Frank, who did you finally land on?
I think I'd always been on Ben's side, but I was certainly thinking back, well, it's hard not to go back to Andrew Guy did beat Dan Murrell in one of his best played matches, if not that is his best played match. So he's certainly capable of that kind of performance. And if that was brought to Houston, then, I thought, Ben, you would have day there, and it was going to be a close match. I always thought it was going to be a close match. I don't think anyone was really calling for a knockout, whoever you were rooting for. I don't think anyone was expecting that. And to this point of the trivia being second in this match, I really liked that the interruptions, if you will, with people coming out. And I think it just added a whole different spin. And what I think this is the path going forward, maybe it's not like this all the time, but I think you pepper this in here every while. It's a nice injection of a different type of energy into these matches, where maybe one match you have these interjections and there is a high level of play on both sides. And now you're looking at, maybe a masterpiece of movie trivia entertainment. And I think that's the top I think we're aiming for here in the Schmoedown.
It could have been, honestly, more of that. I mean, if you go back and watch that match, and I watched our portion of the match, different pieces of it more than once. I think you could say Andrew knew some of All Fears. He asked late, but he would have gotten that question right. So, if he gets that right, then it ends up being 7-6 in round one, which is a great start. And in round two, I always say this to people, but you don't want to play against Kareem because he uses the same move against you every single time you play against Kareem, right? That's why Kareem is good, is because nobody can block what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar does. It almost seems unfair. He has this one move. Well, movie release dates is basically that. It's basically that for a few of us. So if I can give movie release dates to my opponent on an opponent's choice, it is an indefensible thing that nobody else gets put on the wheel. He didn't have a category he could request on the wheel that goes against me that same way. If things go exactly reversed, his best case scenario is that he gives me Kurt Russell or ScarJo or whatever the worst category on there is, because everything else there is a strength. And so thinking back to it, it's if truly that match had just been one of the two scenarios instead of spinners and opponents, and he had any other opponent, that could have been a competitive match.
Sure.
One, and I've seen him in matches before. He's streaky, sure, but it was close. And so I think what you're talking about is well within the realm of possibility. We had to swing it so far in the other direction of theatricality because of what happened. And we even used the double spinners, stuff like that. We just used it to our advantage.
Right, exactly. And okay, one more thing on Houston, and then I want to kind of break down what's been going on with Ben Bateman's career so far this season. But let's talk about just the whole theatrics at the end of the show, and also you working with Booker T. I really just want to get a lot of people's reaction to this because, obviously I work with him on a daily basis.
Right.
But how was it, working with somebody who, Christian holds in high regard, who holds the Schmoedown in high regard?
I mean, Booker is legend, and like a lot of you guys who watch the show or listen to the show know that I didn't grow up on wrestling. I watched a little bit, like way back in the early 2000s. I can remember watching a couple matches here and there, but I wasn't a guy who was very aware of most of the storylines and the history and how it all worked. So I knew Booker T's name, and as I got more into the Schmoedown, the more I realized he was connected to that same era that I remember being kind of aware of the wrestlers. But obviously, the deeper down that rabbit hole that I went, the more I realized that this guy he's a legend. He's truly one of the all-time characters in the history of wrestling. And so to meet him in person, he's a huge man. He's intimidating. He's
Yeah.
But he was such a professional, and he was so excited about it. He was so cool. And I'll tell you, Brad, the thing actually that affected me more than anything we did during the show or in the pre-match interviews was the clip of you guys on the show the next night talking about Houston and the affection with which Booker talked about Andrew and myself and referred to us as performers. He talked about us. He was impressed. You could hear it in his voice. He didn't know that's what he was getting himself into with the live show. And the way he talked about us, Andrew and I talked about this the next day or whenever that happened. We acknowledged, like, almost brought both of us to tears a little bit. This is a guy that did what we did at that show 10x, 100x, 10,000 times. He went around the world doing that on a nightly basis for 20 years. I mean, that's what he did. He entertained tens and hundreds of thousands, millions of people. The fact that guy watched us and called us performers was sort of like, whoa, what? The Schmoedown's more than just bar trivia with some cheap theatrics. This is a real show. This is a real product. And it was amazing to hear that from him after working with them and seeing how quickly he picked up everything we were doing.
Awesome, man. Now, Frank, I know you had some stuff you wanted to run by Ben, and there's a lot to talk about with Ben Bateman in season 6 of the Schmoedown. So go ahead, Frank.
Coming into the season, you guys were favored to get back into a title shot against the Shire Wolves. And, you're going to have to go through the Odd Couple at the Chicago Live event. But, I'm sure you've talked about this before about how the match went. But looking back on it now that you've gotten through Houston, does that match get put into a different lens, a different perspective of maybe we had to go through that to get to where we're at now? Or how do you view that match in terms of your path going forward this season?
Guys, it's so interesting because if you think about somebody like Dan Murrell at the top of the heap, and you think about how good somebody like that is, or the Shire Wolves, these teams that have won multiple championships multiple times, it makes you feel like they have a level of knowledge you don't have or something because they've done it over and over again. And then I think about that, and I think it makes me start to doubt myself in certain moments. Like, well, do I really know enough? Am I really capable of winning? In my worst moments, that's what I think. But then I think about the fact that if we had answered Hector correctly against the Shire Wolves, then we're the champions, and they're not. That's it. It was the difference of one question. In a category I had studied, I watched every Pixar movie the year before to try to game that slice. I have recently watched the movie. It just was a question of recalling the one name. And when I think about that, it makes me realize how close we actually were to getting the championship. And, God, Chicago was such a disappointing ending. It was such a brutal way for that run to end. Some people don't know this, but I, in January, decided to get super focused for the year. I wanted to drop some weight. I wanted to get my mind right. So I took 90 days off drinking. I was 90 days sober starting on January 14th. And 90 days later was April 13th. Day 90 of me being sober was the Chicago event. That was, in my mind, I wanted to finish this 90 days and win the event, go out, have myself a shot of whiskey and celebrate. And I didn't end up doing it, obviously, because, we lost. But I had put so much expectation into that match. And you guys know that I'm known for different methods of studying and all different kind of things I've tried. And I learned some things in that event. Some things you can fix and some things you can't, right? The big miss for Riley and I in that match is that we missed Snatch. Neither of us could remember a context answer for our 5-pointer in Snatch. My big miss in that match was the 3-pointer. It was Overlord. And I could have gamed Overlord because Overlord had been asked about multiple times this season already. It's been asked about multiple times. I think there's been like 3 or 4 Overlord questions by now. And you can know that sort of thing. If there's a movie that comes up that often, you have to know about it. You have to watch it. And so when I look back on Houston, I had started to doubt myself because of what happened in Chicago. When I look back on Chicago, that's a great team. You know, things just didn't go our way that day. And Frank, you know this better than anyone, but I think my numbers suggest a pretty competent player. You put my numbers all time up against most of the other top players, they're in the same class or better than even some of the champions.
Sure.
It will break my way eventually. It just hasn't, which is the most upsetting and frustrating part. I continue to try to find ways to game the system and get ahead, and I get better, but I haven't had that moment yet. So,
yeah, you talk about it breaking your way eventually, because we look at players like Rachel or even Mark and Draco now, or Bibiani, you know, played at high levels, but for whatever reason, bad luck situations, it just wasn't breaking their way, and then it eventually did. I mean, the good news is that list is getting shorter, but the bad news is you're still on the list.
I'm like the only one. I'm like the last one left.
I think a lot of people would agree. You're the last player in the league viewed as the best player to not win a title yet. But I think, you know, if history has shown us that list got shorter, and eventually I think you'll be off the list. I think it is a matter of time, because you're right. Your numbers are up there with some of the best, and your numbers have been getting better. I was looking, you know, when you were playing with Andrew at Party Team Action, you were answering 71%. With Riley, who's the boss, and your individual questions, you're answering 77%. So that's a big jump, and it should be a big jump because the league is getting tougher and deeper, and you've proven that you're meeting that level and oftentimes exceeding it. So, I mean, I'm definitely in the camp that it's eventually going to happen. And if, you know, I am a big supporter of the Shire Wolves, and I thought they might be one of these Patriot-like teams. Got them on a bad day, even though they also had kind of a bad day. They came out on top. But I guess my other question then is watching them, the odd couple, the team that you lost to, that you felt like you could have beaten, seeing them win the title, does that make it any, I don't know, that loss to them any harder or easier to stomach? Because yeah.
I think if I think about the teams that I've lost to in the biggest moments of my career in my team matches, I've lost to the Shire Wolves in two major matches. A number one contender at the live event in LA and the Shire Wolves at the Spectacular last year. They're the best team of all time in terms of pure knowledge. I just think they are. I think they're the best that's ever played. I think I honestly would say that in terms of knowledge, Above the Line is the other best team that's ever played, and that's the other team that I've lost to in the biggest moment. You know, the finals of a tournament with Andrew and a number one contender match, we lost to Above the Line. I think the Patriots, people will talk about this. This will be debated until the day we die, right? Because I don't know if the Patriots will ever reform, and if they do, the league is in a different place. So we might see, you know, Wizards Jordan or something. It's like it's not. It could easily happen. But I just don't think that the teams that the Patriots were having to win in those close matches against were anywhere near the level of the teams we're playing now. I mean, you remember title matches like playing against like Rotten Tomatoes or Trek. Like these teams in my mind are jokes compared to the league. Matt Atchity still doesn't know how to play the game. You know, like the Trek retired. Like I mean, these aren't real contending teams, and so a lot of the Patriots' best wins came against teams like that. Nowadays, in a team match, if you miss 4 questions between 2 players, you'll probably lose. That's ludicrous. That doesn't. 4 questions between 2 players, and you probably lose the match against one of the best teams. That means that if one of you gets 7 in round 1, the other one gets 6 in round 1, and you guys miss your 2-point question, and you are perfect the rest of the match, you still probably lose.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
And so it's just not the same league that it used to be, and you have to get better if you're going to win. So when you talk about the teams I've lost to and watching them lose like that, one of these I've lost to, I would love to have my retribution against every single one of them. Who matters the most to me anymore? I just feel like a vet. All the vets are like we're on the same level now. There's no bitterness. I'm sort of on the face side of things now, and I almost feel like that's who I am now. I have more respect for everyone who's ever beaten me than I ever used to have. I don't feel as arrogant. I feel more mortal. It takes hard work. You got to grind it out. I'm going to grind it out.
Well, let's talk about what you have coming up in singles, because there are a few, paths that you might be leading down in singles. Talk about your upcoming potential singles opponents that you have coming down the line. Jeff Snyder might be one, and that could be some great revenge.
Yeah, I heard Jeff had some really nice things to say about me on the rundown.
He does that, yeah.
I believe I play. I believe I play the winner. I mean, Jeff Snyder's a great player. I believe I play the winner of Janine and Mike Kalinowski. That's my next opponent. I've beaten both of them. I've never lost to either of them. Mike is my favorite player to beat. That's not entirely true, but
feels good when you do. Yeah.
Yeah, and he gets such in his head is the best thing about it. He doesn't have the capacity to play me in singles right now. He's focused on too many leagues. He's focused on character. He's so wrapped up in inner geekdom. He's not going to properly study. He's going to put James Bond on the wheel, and if he doesn't get it, he's going to lose. I am solely focused on regular trivia, and he's got to worry about this whole other thing where he's, focused on the color of somebody's shoelaces or something like that. It's
right.
It's a totally different animal. You're committing yourself to information that is not relatable in a normal sense. I go on a podcast for an hour talking about a movie that's come out that week. I'll probably touch on 25 other movies that are all relevant to what we're talking about. To do the kind of thing that he and Smets and Cushing do, it's like literally you're doing like neurosurgery or rocket science. It's a whole different level. Stuff that's not relatable doesn't make any sense. And then Janine, I have all the respect in the world for Janine as a player, because if you talk about people that have improved, people call me an improved player. She's an incredibly improved player. Janine, she puts in the work. You can tell. She really knows her stuff. I watched Janine get strong. She has strong showings in round 1. She has real tact in round 2. She plays the game well. She comes out tough as nails as a character. I mean, her outfits are on point. I really have a lot of respect for Janine. And truthfully, looking back to the match I played against Janine, this is funny because it's the flip side of what I just said about Chicago. I played the entirety of last year's tournament drunk. You guys know that, right?
I mean, it certainly seemed like a little bit, yeah.
I wasn't hammered, but I was drinking Jameson out of that flask.
Right.
I would drink most of a flask of Jameson through a match. And at the time that we played that day, the gauntlet day against her and Long.
That's right. You're playing 2 matches in that one day?
Back to back, and I was playing every week. And I was off in round 1 against both of them. I think I got like 4 points each in those round 1s.
Something like, yeah.
They were bad matches for me. And if Janine hadn't made a rookie error, she did. She made a rookie mistake in that match where I think she guessed like best actress instead of best supporting actress, and who I think it was like Patricia Arquette for Boyhood.
Oh, right.
That swung the whole match, and that's one of those things where today's Janine doesn't make that mistake. She could have beaten me in that match. I didn't play my best game. I know Janine is capable of winning. I'm more scared of playing against Janine than Mike, though I believe I'll beat either player. And then Snyder. If I get through one of them. Snyder's as dangerous as anybody, right? He's flappable. We've seen what happens when Snyder tilts. He's easier to tilt, but Snyder's got a good manager now. He's got somebody who actually can turn it on.
This whole deal with Roxy now, and your history is now taking place in the Schmoedown. Did you ever think you'd get to a point in the Schmoedown? You've been always so focused on the trivia aspect and winning. Did you ever think one day that Christian might have some bright-eyed idea of weaving this in here? And how did you feel about it initially when broached about the prospects of your outside life coming into the Schmoedown life?
Well, it's interesting because Roxy and I have never had a clear cut, like we dated and then we broke up and then we hated each other and we wouldn't speak to each other. We've worked in the same circle through the entirety of dating and breaking up. And so, and we have a lot of respect for each other professionally, and we're still close. And so the reality of this being weaved in, I think we always knew there was a possibility because we both worked around the Schmoedown and we both were around each other in professional capacities so often. The Schmoedown does mirror reality. And so Christian found the angle that he wanted to run. And if we had been that traditional kind of couple where we broke up and didn't want to be in the same room as each other, it never would have worked. I think a lot of couples just that wouldn't work. And Christian wouldn't have tried it. But I think we both have such a commitment to our professional lives and performance that we were both interested when he found a way to use that. And obviously, if it had been a story that we weren't comfortable with, we just wouldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. But it's been really fun and interesting to be able to take the aspects of real life and weave those together to turn this into the story we're getting now. We were at the studio a few weeks ago, and the Shirewolves match was coming up, and she asked me, who do you want to see win? And without thinking, I said the Shire Wolves because I want to beat the Shire Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of gave me this look.
Yeah.
She said, that's a really mean thing to say. And I said, no, I don't mean to. And I was like, oh, shit. I didn't even, you know what I mean? I didn't even realize. Like, I just I want your team to lose, is what I said to her. And she was not pleased, you know? She takes it very seriously. She's a student of the game. She loves her team. She wants to be a champion. She wants manager of the year. She loves that stuff. So that's kind of a great example of like, you just forget sometimes. I just think about myself. I'm in a Schmoedown. This is my game. This is my league. I'm a pro. You know, she's a manager. She doesn't think about it that way. She's managing a team. She wants the odd couple to win. She manages fighters. She wants her fighters to win the fight. I've been telling Christian for a little while now that I want all competitors to be referred to as pros. Schmoedown pros. When you bring somebody on the show, we've got Schmoedown pro Jeff Snyder on the show today. Competitor, we're professional trivia players. That's what we do. We travel around the country and we do these high stakes matches that are not rigged. They're totally official. We are as professional of trivia players when it comes to movie trivia as anybody else who plays movie trivia. So why would we not be pros, right? And that's how she treats her fighters. She treats them as pros. She wants them to be the best. She wants to win. She wants to manage winners, you know, more so than maybe any manager in the league.
Now, and I got to ask, and a follow-up to kind of all this is, again, I think you speak about both of your professionalism, and that's just kind of part of the gig and where things are going now. And I think people are really curious. I've seen some comments where, I don't know if they're part of the Action Army or not, but Schmoedown fans nonetheless are saying, I don't know what to feel about this, this story going forward. What would you say to those fans who are uneasy or having a little bit of a time adjusting to the story that's being put forth now?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's a story. It's inspired by reality. As I said a second ago, if there was anything that any of us was really uncomfortable with, the story would go away. Mm-hmm. You know, as it goes, you can move it in one direction or another a little bit. You can at least nudge it. So if one of us didn't like it, we would tell Christian that, and we would find a way to move around it. Look, there's a full hour-long behind-the-scenes reaction that Drew and I did together after Houston on the Action Industries channel. We do these, whether we used to be on a team, then we were playing on separate teams, and now even playing against each other, and even so much hitting them with a chair. We are very honest in that video about what it is like to compete in this league against somebody you care about. And it's not an act. It's a real match. We both want to win. I don't know if either one of you guys watched it, but we talk a lot about, like, I told him during the week, you have nothing to lose, and it pissed him off. You know, he was not pleased. We walked into the gym at the hotel in the morning, and we happened to be there at the same time. We might have said 3 words to each other. You know, like, it's embarrassing to go up there and miss a lot of questions in front of a live crowd. He didn't like that. It made him feel shitty. You know, the same way I would have hated losing to Andrew in that crowd. It would have been awful. And there's no avoiding that. You have to be willing to compete against somebody knowing full well you're going to hit roadblocks and there's going to be weird stuff. Roxy and I have a similar thing going on with this where we know, like, it's all fun and games and it's great, but you can't anticipate day to day what some stupid fan's going to say online, or what if she and I in real life get in a huge fight and we don't want to be in the same room as each other. And we still have to film these scenes. We're in the middle of a storyline. I mean, that's a risk you take. You're willing to do it because you love the product and you know it will serve the show. And we all are performers. We like being a part of it. But I'm comfortable with it now. I know they are both comfortable with it now. And just stay tuned, guys, because there's some really cool stuff coming. I mean, the story is just getting better.
And I guess before we get you out of here, why don't you pump out that just Action Industries, all this new stuff you got going on? So I see that you and Andrew are doing streams, and you got this whole page going on. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, so if the people don't know about it?
Yeah. So I mentioned these reactions. I mean, Action Industries was born in the same way that a lot of the action stuff was a few years back on the Popcorn Talk Network. Drew and I started this show together called Action Movie Anatomy. We've done about 4 years, 200 episodes worth of the show now. It's like a 1 hour long podcast review show. That's what got us on Christian's radar. So then we started this Team Action in the Schmoedown, and that became a show at Collider called The Action Guys that we do. And eventually what we realized was that when Action Movie Anatomy goes away, or the Action Guys goes away, or eventually if we stop competing in the Schmoedown, we needed to have something we had created where we could interact with the audience that we've created through all these years, because shows come and go. We needed something that was ours. And so we decided we were going to double down. We were going to start Action Industries. And so what it is right now is a place where you can get the full unedited videos of the action guys. The behind the scenes Schmoedown reactions are available on patreon.com/teamaction at the $2 and above level. Every match that we're in, we'll do a behind the scenes reaction to. And we always keep those private because we don't want to open up the kayfabe breaking too much we want you to be a part of that club if you really want to do it. Otherwise, we don't want 10,000 people watching these behind the scenes things. It infringes on the show too much if that's the case. And now we're doing these streams. We decided to start doing live streams. So Drew and I are doing 3 a week, one together on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I get the Wednesday stream at 9:30 p.m. and he takes the Thursday stream at 2 p.m. So we've got all the time zones covered. But it's an opportunity to really interact with us on a slightly more personal level. We want those solo streams to exist, that if you do have questions about stuff like our Schmoedown study regimens, or what video games we're playing, or what's our preparation like just on a week-to-week basis to stay focused and hustle and work hard, you can ask those questions and we can have a time to talk to you about stuff that's a little more personal to us. And we've been doing a lot of that, and the reaction's been really amazing. And so, go check those out. I guess the last thing to plug here, I don't know exactly when this goes up, but some of you guys have seen these coins.
Oh, they are
so sweet.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to see if I can get this to focus on the coin here.
Chris drew up a picture, yeah.
But that's the Bateman side here, and on the other side is the Guy side. These were gifted to us by one of the members of the Action Army, Nick Gilmore. The designs actually came from Janine the Machine, incidentally. And they're rewards right now for the $50 and above the general tier on our Patreon. We ran a special that goes through this Friday, the 9th. I guess it's just through tomorrow. I don't know when this comes out necessarily, but
probably mine right here.
Yeah, there you go.
It's these are legit, dude.
They're sweet, yeah. And so we had the special where everybody at the $25 tier until tomorrow gets one of these things. And then they go back up to the $50 tier, and we'll probably bring them back towards the end of the year. But we only have a few of them. So we wanted to really make it a special thing because we're not making more of these. And so, that's the special we're running right now. But go check out patreon.com/teamaction. I mean, even at the $1 tier, guys, we're doing like live lens views, like Instagram story stuff on there every day. And there's tons of content and the best community of fans that you'll ever meet. There's 200 plus patrons right now, and they're amazing.
I gotta say, when I was in Houston,
came out strong in Houston. Yeah, Liam, shout out to Liam. I gotta give him another shout out. A lot of the Action Army came out and represented, and it was actually the coin. And I told the story on the show. So for some reason, I was talking to Andrew Guy the night before the Houston event. I was like, and he was convincing me. He was like, I'm gonna go out there. I'm in Ben's head. I got him. There's no chance. I got him. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I think Andrew Guy might have this. And then when y'all were making your entrances, I had that coin in my hand and I was looking at it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to leave the fate of the game up to the coin. I'm going to flip the coin. Flip the coin. It landed on Ben Bateman. So then I changed my pick and you won. So so you trust in the coins and they will steer you in the right way. Last question for you, Ben. We know it's your birthday. We're going to get you out of here. But the last thing we got for you, did you ever, in your wildest dreams in the Schmoedown, think that you would be a horseman?
No, I didn't. Again, trying to be as candid as possible about it. I never wanted to be a horseman ever. I was very against it, and I told Christian no over and over again. What
were some of the reasons why you felt that way, if I can ask? I
mean, going back to the beginning of why it was no, it was that we had this rivalry with Top 10 and with Roca. That's where it started. And then it became this real feeling of like, we were the performers of the league and everybody else were these curmudgeons that didn't know what they were doing out there, and really standing behind that, feeling like we knew what we were doing as performers. And, it's young versus old. And then as the story got further and deeper, I started to recognize more and more that, okay, now I'm playing with Riley, and okay, so Dagnino, he'd be one, and okay, well, I mean, Dan's the greatest of all time. And then now there's sort of a begrudging respect for Roca. And I'll tell you, this is a funny story. You guys will laugh about this. Christian thinks this is great. Paul Oyama is one of the newer players who's up and coming. And Paul, he's this young kid, he comes out in like a hoodie and sunglasses or whatever. And, he doesn't have much of a character yet, right? His character is kind of that he's really knowledgeable and he's young and he's this hot shot. And Chance was kind of a similar way when Chance started. Oyama's really good, though. Oyama knows a lot. It's clear. Mm-hmm. He ran the classics category. I mean, that guy is dialed in. He knows stuff that I don't know why he knows, or he has no business knowing.
Sure.
And the way he answers questions sometimes, he's real pompous, And it's funny, I texted Christian the other day and I said, watching Oyama, I don't know if I've disliked a new competitor so much, LOL. And then I said, such a young, arrogant prick. And then I was like, oh my God, I am John Roca. I said, and I was like, and I was totally kidding, because like I interact with Paul at the studio, right? And like he's a young player, he's really knowledgeable, he's very good. But like I was recognizing that like his character is this young, arrogant kid. That is his character. And it totally worked. And he totally was getting me. Yeah. And that I was totally John Roca. And then I was like, all right. So when I realized that, I was like, I guess I belong with these Horsemen guys more than I realized, because we are vets now. Roca's done it longer, but like I'm not new and young and up and coming anymore. I'm a veteran of this league. I'm one of the most seasoned competitors there is at this point. So where do I belong if I want to be elite, other than the team with the most elite players that's ever played? And that's where I belong now. So,
well, that is where you belong. That's where you are. 1/3 of Who's the Boss, 1/5 of the 5 Horsemen, and 1/2 of the Action Army. Forever, he is the boss. Ben Bateman. Ben, and you can follow him at Ben Bateman Media everywhere. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
You got it, guys. You're the best. Thanks for having me back on.
Many thanks to Ben the Boss Bateman joining us here at his birthday, man. Shout out to the man. He's an old timer now, as you said, as he say in the league. Yeah. That's why he's a member of the 5 Horsemen, better known as AARP, brother. But let's move on. Let's talk about something that we didn't get time to talk about last week, and these are our closing minutes of the show. Once again, guys, we ran over time. We're going to take your questions next week. I promise you we're going to take your questions next week. But let's go to the Faction Wars, Frank Janisch, an article that you pinned over there at TriviaSD.com. Tell people, give us some background. What are the Faction Wars? And let's discuss them a little bit.
So what really sparked this idea in my mind was the fact that I saw a post about, Kaiser and this corruption, Kaiser and corruption going at the dungeon and corruption going against each other. And people were like, is it a fair fight? And I was like, well, the Dungeons now got Paul and Zipper and Smets to be interdictum, and you line that up with corruption with Kalinowski, Chance, and now Tim Franco or Stacey Howard, however you want to interchange that third person. It's like, that seems like a pretty fair fight to me. And then I was like, well, damn, like that's another faction that started up with Kaiser and the Dungeon, and then you have the Founding Fathers, and then you have all this stuff going on with the family and the Odd Couple happening with Roxy, as that intermediary with Andrew Guy. And I was like, shit, we have a lot of factions here. And prior to this time or this season, we've had the Lions, and they were like the dominant faction, and there was the Horsemen there, the 4 Horsemen, but the Horsemen never really took off. We all know that history, and the Lions Den ruled the Schmoedown for like a year and a half, and they were dominant. And it was only one faction, but I feel like right now the talent is so evenly spread around amongst like these 5 factions with Founding Fathers, you have corruption, you have the Dungeon, you have this unification between the family and Odd Couple somewhat seemingly starting to take shape. And then you throw in, of course, Jay Washington with Janine and Ethan. And then I theorized about who else they could add. And I was like, well, if this Brendan Meyer Bibiani thing comes to fruition, maybe they get absorbed or they join Jay and company. But I was like, well, Shirewolves, maybe for whatever reason, maybe they join up with Jay. It would be interesting. That's a long shot, but it could happen. So that could be another 5th faction that forms. And I was like, well, shoot, if we ended up, how could we pit everyone against each other? And with Friday's match with Liz and David Del Rio, that Commissioner Bowl kind of is a bit of what I was going for, but I took it a step further. As in the article I mentioned, if you had kind of like a, fans out there, wrestling fans specifically, have been clamoring for like a Survivor Series type of event in the Schmoedown. Brad, can you explain what a Survivor Series is to a layman?
A Survivor Series match is a traditional tag team affair that we see annually in the WWE since the 1980s, and it's where teams of originally were 4, but sometimes of 5. Will go against each other 1-on-1. So 5-on-5, I guess I should say, and eliminations occur. And then the team that wins is the team that has eliminated all 5 members or 4 members of the opposing team.
So it was like, well, maybe we get some sort of version of that Schmoedown style. I was like, well, you could have, we have these 3 leagues. I mean, sorry, Star Wars, but we have these 3 leagues. And if you took someone from each faction, you put them in a league-specific match, you could have like a running total of points, and then whoever has the most points could win this Survivor Series of sorts. I don't know what you would call it exactly. Maybe you call it Faction Wars. I don't know. That's cool. I'll take.
I like Faction Wars.
Yeah. And and then the award would have to be something huge. And so I kind of was like, well, maybe you give away a couple number 1 contender spots, maybe give away some guaranteed tournament spots. So there's a lot that I kind of like theorized within the article. So if you haven't read it, go check it out, triviasd.com. Look for it. It's like you scroll down a little bit, it should be there. And it was a lot of fun thinking of all these table combinations that could happen when you pit these factions together. And I got to tell you, like, this is probably the most fun I've had writing something for the site so far. And I've compiled some stuff and it's been fun, but this one, man, it really got like the creative juices flowing, really got me hyped. And there was some good feedback on the article from those that read and left comments. And I'm telling you, like, I was just think of this singles table. If it was a faction war, you could possibly have from Founding Fathers, Dan Murrell, from Corruption, Chance, from Jay's faction, the Viper Squad, or whatever they're going to be called, if they're still called Viper Squad, Ethan Irwin, and then from the Dungeon, Paul Oyama, and then from the Family/Odd Couple faction form, maybe Drew McWeeny. If you had all 5 of them on a table, 5 rounds, no knockouts, TKOs, you just straight go to the end. Sign me up.
Brother, we're talking about, it would be great because Survivor Series, also known as one of the big 4 pay-per-views in the WWE. You have the Royal Rumble, which is the free-for-all. You have the SummerSlam, which is the Collision. And you have WrestleMania, which is the Spectacular in the movie Trivia Schmoedown. We're missing the big 4. We're missing the 4th.
The 4th.
And if the Faction Wars could be an annual event in the movie Trivia Schmoedown, I would love to see it. And I'd love to see it live. Streaming pay-per-view. If you could pull that off, in the same way we're going to see Collision later on this year. I'm assuming, although I haven't talked to Christian or anybody about it, but if Collision's live, I'm assuming maybe Spectacular is going to be live.
I would think
hopefully. If all that stuff goes down, I would really, because I think when we first started doing the show together, we got a question about would there ever be a Survivor Series style match in the movie Trivia Schmoedown. We theorized it. At the time, it seemed less likely than it does now because now you have such a large pool. You have a big roster. You have a lot of factions at play. And sometimes factions can just be invented for the night because a lot of times in the Survivor Series, there were just these random teams put together and they had a team name and they were a faction for the night. They had the Ultimate Warriors was the name of them. You had the Ultimate Warrior, the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, and you had Kerry Von Erich, a.k.a. the Modern Day Warrior. So a lot of times you can just put these teams together. They're marketable right off the key, and people would want to see them in these interesting, strange bedfellow type scenarios. And then, boom, you do it in Faction Wars. Big prize on the line.
Right.
I really like this, Frank Jan.
And so, like, that was part of my idea. It's like, well, why would the Shire Wolves ever want to join a faction? Well, because the prize is so big that the only way to win is being a part of the faction. So what? You form a one-day faction to win, to be eligible to win at that prize. So storyline-wise, it would force you, whoever you might be, to want to join a faction or, to say yes to join a faction, to be eligible to have whatever prize there might be. That's kind of the way I justified it in my mind. The other thing was, you're right about this being live, because I think it's been stated. I think Christian might have said, like, I would love to do something like this, but we just don't have the studio space. This is before we were doing live events and could get 1,000-seat arenas and stadiums, whatever, theaters. So this is definitely an event that I think is primed, just like the free for all was primed for a live event, primed for a live space with a live crowd. I mean, seeing, like, if just theorize about the table combinations, like for Inner Geekdom, for example, like if you had Kalinowski, right, Smets, Rachel Cushing, you had someone, what was the other ones? Maybe Dan Murrell gets in there because it's a faction war, right? People have been wanting to see him in there, and then maybe you bring back Robert Meyer Burnett for fun because he was a former champ when it all first started. I mean, that's a crazy table. Even if you just look at Kalinowski, Smets, and Cushing, like, holy crap. Then you throw Merle in there. I mean, again, just run wild with table combinations, and you will be hyped. I promise you.
I mean, it would be also cool if you almost had, the teams are almost all former champions of some kind,
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, maybe Mark Hanopic comes back. You have Hector Navarro, Robert Meyer Burnett, Rachel Cushing. Just the Kevin Smets. The possibilities are endless when you think about these things. And I really, really enjoy this concept. And I want to throw it to the fans, man. The boat and the tank want to know, what do y'all think of the faction wars? Is this something y'all want to see? Is it something you think that we could pull off? And who would your factions be? Who would your dream factions be? Let's leave it in the comments, brother. Let's leave it in the comments.
I'm wondering what kind of other, like you're talking about faction for a day, I'm wondering, what kind of it's kind of take a page out of Anarchy, where you just kind of team up random people, and then sometimes you get teams like Who's the Boss, and you get teams like The Odd Couple, or just like holy crap, and then maybe a faction for a day ends up being a faction for a year. You never know what could come out of it.
Or a faction forever.
Faction forever. Hashtag.
You don't know. You never hashtag faction forever. Or you know what? I mean, even in these things, which is cool. I mean, even if you could maybe structure a little different. You had teams of 4 competing in some sort of tag style, elimination match. You could have this could be a tournament. I mean, this could be a tournament exclusive to Patreon. There's all kinds of things that you could do. And who knows? Maybe, maybe the boat, the tank, Chris Clark, we recruit one more, maybe a ringer.
Maybe we go and holler at Aaron Turner down in Orlando.
Maybe Aaron Turner comes back, brother, and we make something happen. And we make something happen in the Schmoedown. You never know what could happen in the Movie Trivia Schmoedown. And that's what I love about this league. Frank Janisch, why don't you let people know where they can find you and follow you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FrankieJ29, and on the PJ Campbell Show. That's where you can find me.
Chris Clark, over to you, my brother.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, as always, at ChrisClark8788. Those numbers mean nothing. And the Schmoedown Classic feed has been updated as the broadcast of this episode. Season 3 is now up. All 68 episodes.
Ooh.
68
my brother.
Episodes.
They couldn't do one more. That's okay. I'm a child.
It might be
come
one
on,
more.
Frank, grow up.
It might be. But yeah, make sure to check that out and binge to your heart's content, my brother. So keep rocking.
Frank, you're what the French call les compétents.
And proud.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We gotta own that shit.
You can find me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. Make sure you check out Booker T and I's show, The Hall of Fame, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays on ESPN Radio, and also on your favorite podcast app. New episodes of Back to the Future, the podcast, coming out soon, and new episodes of The Brad Gilmore Show is out. I had Tommy Avalone, who's the director of the Bill Murray Stories, which is a great documentary that's on Netflix about all these things you've heard about Bill Murray throughout the years. Is that true? Did that really happen? My man Tommy Avalone goes down and figures it out. He breaks it down. It's almost like a Finding Bigfoot documentary. So go check that out. Check out my interview with Tommy. And also dropping this weekend an interview with Matt Schrader. Matt Schrader is the creator of the Blockbuster podcast, which is a podcast that goes back and looks at the relationship between Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, studies their friendships in a narrative style way. So if you like the narrative of how maybe a podcast like Serial was, this is what Blockbuster is. Season 1 is up now. I talked to Matt Schrader about the idea, and we kind of get into George Lucas and Steven Spielberg a little bit and why these guys connected with movie audiences for decades and decades. So go check those out, and you can check us out. The boat has a compass that doesn't point north, but he's going to find his way back to the video screen next week. For Frank Janisch and Chris Clark, I am the boat, Brad Gilmore, and we'll see you next week here on the Schmoedown Rundown.
You know what I did today at work? I inadvertently did a Macho Man Randy Savage impersonation. I was lifting a bag, put it in a cart, and as I did, it was super heavy. So I go, "Oh yeah!" I was like, "What did I just do?"
He's gonna puke.
Oh god! I can't stop thinking about that now.
That documentary?
Yeah, well, that and the puke part.
The puke part is great.
I mean, I was just like.
You're going to get sick? Huh?
He didn't even puke, right? He just spit up, basically?
No, he spit up, yeah.
Yeah, but I was like...
cut the recording now?
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't
we're
know that
good,
was
yeah.
the bit.
30 seconds ago.
Yeah, we just find a
Okay.
place to cut.
Okay, well.
Yeah.